we could solve it very soon. So, okay, just let me give you a warm welcome with this video. I will switch it off soon, so it doesn't interfere with the connectivity. Let me take advantage of this opportunity to wish you a happy new year. May this 2017 bring a lot of good things for all of you. And well, as you know, this is the fourth webinar of a series that started last year. And let me now switch this off. The purpose of this series is to explore in depth the 6 dimensions of a framework to understand context that politics and ideas develop jointly with INASP. And the idea is that this series of webinars will help us discuss how we concretely incorporate this framework ideas in our interventions and daily work. So let me briefly introduce myself. I am Leandro Echt. I am the General Coordinator of Politics and Ideas. Politics and Ideas is a network of researchers and practitioners interested in linking ideas and knowledge with policymaking in the South. I'm together with Vanessa Weyrauch and Shahenda Suleiman. I am one of the authors of the framework. Vanessa is also joining us through the chat. Yes, we are glad to see many colleagues that have been joining us from the very beginning of the series. For those who would like to access the previous webinars, we have shared, and we will also share it afterwards, the previous recorded versions together with this one. So that's another point. We are recording this webinar and we will share it afterwards in case you need to come back to your duties, because some of you thought it was the webinar was earlier, so that things happen. So let me tell you a brief words about the methodology for today. So if you have been joining us in other webinars, you know that we are so many that it's not possible for to give voice to everybody. So the way it works is that myself, Louise, and Mapula, who I will introduce timely, will be the speakers, and you can jump in through the chat with your questions, comments, or concerns whenever you want. We will be picking them up and give the right answers. But of course, we'll have 2 specific questions and answer sessions timely. So let me jump directly into the agenda for today. So the first in the first part, we will address and get into this dimension of the framework that gathers us today, which is organizational management and process to incorporate knowledge in policy making. So we will discuss its relevance and also its main subdimensions. In the second part, we will let Louise and Mapula explain their work about enhancing processes and management issues within South Africa public sector. and we will finish with some remarks and some next steps. So let me jump directly into the framework. Just 1 second, please. One second, I'm just trying to set the framework for you, so you can watch it in your screens. I'm also sharing the link in case you don't have it. This is the, yeah, thank you, Vanessa, very much. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So I'm not sure if you can see the framework in your screens. In case it's not this, if you cannot see it the state of the webinar, I would recommend you go through it in your own computer. Yes, you can just a final attempt to see if you can. I think now it's working. So if you, I guess now you should see the framework in your computers, right? Thank you very much. Apologize for this minute. So okay, so here you see you're watching our framework. So let me briefly explain the main goals of our effort within us. So the idea of developing this framework was to detect main contextual factors that affect the promotion and use of knowledge in policymaking, and with the idea of helping those interested in promoting more interaction between knowledge and policy to better understand this idea of context, and thus identify the most promising potential areas for change in terms of within their institutions. So these efforts resulted in 3 main products. So 2 papers, one that contains the conceptual framework, and the second one that has presents some implications that emerge from our framework. Both papers are available here. If you can if you are watching the screen, you can access them there. And the third product was this interactive product that present the main content and lessons from our work. So we have 6 dimensions of our framework: the micro context, intra and interrelationships, culture, organizational capacity, management and processes, and other resources. So this time, this 4th webinar is about this 5th dimension, the yellow one that you are watching in your screen. So what does management and processes refer to? So they refer to the processes that determine the way in which governmental institutions organize their work to achieve their missions and goals. So this is the way we understand the issue of management and processes based on what we gather from literature review and also from interviews with policymakers around the world. So, of course, this is a very broad definition, but it gives us some ideas what to understand by this dimension. So, indeed, if you work in different type of organizations, and you will agree that the daily work in our institutions depends a lot of ongoing processes and policies, and also on how routines are made. So the way these organizational processes are set up will determine the type of interactions that take place within our institutions, and this includes, of course, how and if knowledge and evidence is used to solve problems, to make decisions, and also to communicate the organization's work. So, I did with the 6 dimensions of the framework. We wrote down the management and processes in 5 subdimensions, which are the smaller yellow circles that you see, that you watch in your screen. So let me briefly go through these subdimensions. So the first, if you stand on each subdimension, you will see in the right column that a definition about it appears. So let me just remark some highlights. So we'll start with the degree of systematic planning. So we understand this as one of the main subdimensions within management and processes, and this refers to the existence or not of overall national strategies and plans that can encourage the use of evidence, or for instance, that refer to strong monitoring and evaluation components. The existence of these processes will encourage institutions to use evidence and perform some time of monitoring and evaluation, or evidence survey, etc. So this is especially applicable to the planning stage. So indeed, the planning processes can open opportunities to incorporate research. For example, when diagnostics or baselines to support a new program or policy are demanded. So, of course, if your degree of systematic planning is, I would say, stable or high, your plan can set also some ideas about the potential research agenda and the need to gather information to monitor and evaluate. Also, the subdimension of planning makes some reference to the links between the planning and the budgeting, which are also crucial in terms of allowing new funds to commission new research. So Louise and Mapula will address the issue of budget later on. Just an example of experience that involves a high degree of planning is the South African National Evaluation Policy Framework. I don't know if you have seen it. It is a good example of how these overall strategies can push institutions to make a better use of evidence. So now let me move to the second subdimension. It refers to the existence or not of formal processes to access and use evidence in policymaking. Of course, we can say that if we have concrete and formal processes to access and use evidence, our institutions will have a greater degree of use of knowledge. So these formal processes might refer, for instance, to evidence-based peer review processes for internal policy briefs. It might also refer to the situations when parliamentary committees inquire parliamentarians to gather evidence to discuss government policies, or also very common, the requirements for spending bids to be supported by an analysis of the existing evidence. So these formal processes will help us make a better use of evidence. So in our work, in our study, we identify that besides these formal processes are very useful to promote the use of evidence, it's not very common to see these processes when it comes to the relationship with other external stakeholders. So it's more common to see these external stakeholders coming in to inform specific policy discussions, some program design, or other aspects in terms of implementation, but in a more ad hoc way, not in a systematic and formal way. So this is another aspect to keep in mind. Let me jump to the third subdimension. This refers to the positions and roles and responsibilities that an institution set to related to the gathering and use of evidence. So it is expected that if we have specific positions and roles regarding the use of evidence, that will help us to incorporate more accurate and useful evidence into decision making. Just to go quickly, a fourth subdimension refers to the communication processes, and what we have seen is that communication processes are critical for institutions to relate with other stakeholders, and indeed some institutions are very effective in communicating their research to different audiences, including producing formal research report, attractive documents, attractive video, sound, data visualizations with evidence of analysis and interpretation of policies and results. So this is another aspect that it's important in terms of processes and management for use and communication of evidence. And finally, the fifth subdimension within this within management and processes refers to an increasingly implemented processes that are monitoring and evaluation. These indeed are very helpful to generate internal knowledge, and that both processes are meant to make knowledge more available for decision makers, and also make organizational learning easier and more systematic. So while we found that many institutions in developing countries are increasingly working with these processes, we also saw that the main challenge is the systematization of these efforts. So, for instance, you might have an evaluation, or you might commission an evaluation, but then you don't have any incentive to incorporate the recommendations that emerge from that evaluation. So these are this was a brief introduction to the management and process dimensions and subdimensions. You can also access some emerging practices in this yellow rectangle that refers to different subdimensions, and that will give you an idea of how others, institutions and players are working with these management and processes to promote a better use of evidence in policy making. So let me now ask you a very brief questions to make this more interactive. We have put together a poll. I would like to give you 2 minutes to answer the question of what subdimension do you think that is most in your practice? So, sorry, Cornelia says she cannot hear me. What about the others? Can you hear me well? Okay, thanks, Vanessa. Okay, let's hope Cornelia will join later. So please take 2 minutes to answer these questions. So we have gone through 5 subdimensions of the regarding management and processes. You can think about which is the one that have, sorry, that weighs most in your practice. What is the main, the most important processes of these 5? Sorry, please do not. Of these 5 that, sorry, the setting is changing. Please, maybe Louise or Mapula, try to keep this screen. What do you think is the if you are watching the poll, what do you think is the subdimension that weighs most in your practice? What is the main important process related to the use of evidence in decision making? Just let's take 1 or 2 minutes. So some of you are answering. So we have different type of responses. So it seems that you give more importance to the existence of formal processes in decision to incorporate evidence in decision making. So this is a very interesting point, because as we can all recognize this as a very important process that should be in place, from our experience, it's very weird to find, it's not frequent to find these formal processes in place in policy institutions. what about your experience? Do your organizations have these formal processes in place? I'm sure Mapula and Louise will give us some insights from the South African practice in some minutes. So first, the formal processes is the most important dimension according to your responses. Then in second place, we have the degree of systematic planning. So the idea behind this is that if we have good planning processes in place, that will allow us to make a better use of evidence along the policy processes. And finally, you give some value to the existence of positions and responsibilities within your institutions. So the existence of specific roles to deal with evidence will increment the chances to make a better use of evidence. So yeah, very interesting responses, and many thanks for answering. And let me now open this the next minutes for some question from your side. I saw some of you typing, so if you have any questions or comment regarding okay, Fred, I will. What about now? Let me know if you see the results now. Okay, this is what I was saying. So the system of formal processes seems the most important sub-dimension, followed by the degree of systematic planning and the existence of positions and responsibilities. So nobody seems to understand the communication processes as an important, let's say, incentive to incorporate evidence into policy making. So we can discuss this now if you have an interest. So the idea is that let's use the next 5 minutes in case you have questions regarding the general framework and specifically the dimension of management and processes and the issues that I have been addressing recently. So if you have any question regarding the framework, if you want to share briefly your experience with these sub-dimensions. So any comment on the results? Are you surprised that the way are you surprised about the responses that emerge from the poll? Do you okay, Fred, very interesting question. Let me first pick up Fred's question, and you can jump in, of course, with your own comments. So, okay, the idea is that we understand that knowledge management is can be understood, and one processes within this broader dimension. So for sure, knowledge management doesn't cover all of these subdimensions, but can be understood as one of the process in place to promote the use of evidence in policymaking. So while knowledge management makes some references or contains the idea of planning, of formal processes, of communication, it doesn't refer, for instance, to maybe, or it doesn't make explicit reference to the issue of positions and roles to deal with them. And yeah, that would be my first reaction, but I invite others to discuss this question that is a very good one. So we also, if you had the chance to look at the entire framework, you'll see that we identify 6 dimensions. So the idea of knowledge management is also linked to the dimension of culture, not only to the dimension of management and processes. So I think the concept has a lot of links with the management and processes dimension, but it's not exhaustive, and I would say that the dimension includes this practice rather than are the same. What do the others think about this? Let's see Fred's reply. Okay, let's wait for more responses, but I think that's an interesting questions, and of course the framework and this purpose of put the reality into dimensions, which of course is it's an exercise that in a way simplifies the existing reality, make us sometimes not being so exhaustive, but it rather than that, we should make the effort to identify the gray areas, and knowledge management seems to be one process together with others that can promote the use of evidence in practice. So, okay, we can continue with this later. So let me pick Drake's comments. So he says that the existence of formal processes incorporates all the other. So it's a very important subdimension. Yes, in a way it does, but many times we see that we can have those other subdimensions in a way that foster the use of evidence, but they are not formal processes. So yes, sometimes the planning, the monitoring and evaluation has to do more with the culture of the organization, but are not formalized in particular or concrete processes. Let me pick up Vanessa's comment on knowledge management. So she says that it is more than communicating knowledge, and there are some overlaps between both processes. Communication supports knowledge, so that knowledge can be identified, saved, shared, etc. Yes, I agree. I think this is we need to find the grace within the different processes, and I would state again that knowledge management could be one process within the dimension. So I'm sorry, but we started 5 minutes late, so I would like to move forward with our agenda, and in that sense present and introduce our speakers today. So let me introduce Louise and Mapula, who will help us on this discussion and on how management and processes influence the way evidence can contribute or not to develop better policies. So while I'm just enabling their audios, but in the meanwhile, let me share some words on their experience. So Louise Shaxson is a senior research fellow at the Overseas Development Institute, so a think tank in the UK. She has a focus on the implementation of evidence-informed approaches to policy inside government departments for the last 15 years. And Louise will be with Mapula Tshangela, who is the Senior Policy Advisor at the National Department of Environmental Affairs in South Africa. Mapula manages policy and research interface for implementation of the National Strategy for Sustainable Development and the environment sector research, development, and evidence framework. So Louise and Mapula are part of a team that has been working on enhancing the capacity of the South African Department of Environmental Affairs to use evidence in their policies. They will share their experience. We are very grateful about their generous contribution to this discussion, and let's give them the chance to explain their lessons and share their experience, and then we can jump in with a new question, another session. So Louise and Mapula, if you are there, apologize for the delay, and now all the webinar is yours.
Thank you, Leandro, and good afternoon to everyone, and to morning to some of you. Yes, I am Mapula Tshangela with Louise here, and we will try to share with you briefly what we've learned in terms of the use of framework that politics and ideas is working with. So I'm not sure if Louise wants to do a quick intro also, then we can take you through the slides.
No, I think Leandro gave a good introduction. I don't think I have anything more to add.
Okay. Thank you. So I will take you through to what we have done in terms of structuring our way of how a government department is prioritizing and sourcing and using its evidence base, but then also in terms of the budget, how we're doing in terms of the expenditure. And this context is in line with the politics and ideas framework. If you look at page 52 on how it introduces the dimension on management and practices. So we have a environment sector research and development framework that was and the other counterpart ministers from the provinces in June 2012, and framework aims to specifically promote a common approach to an evidence-based or evidence-informed policy making. But as an environment sector, we development, biodiversity, climate change, equality, oceans, and conventional policy themes that are looked at by the ministries of environment mostly globally. So we are a national department. So what we do is then we try to interface with what our coordination of the R&D strategy and the 10-year innovation plan and some of the plans such as the Global Change Research Plan. So they have specific themes that they to look at of the science. In terms of, Leandro spoke about the formal processes. So in terms of the formal processes, we have such a structure that we used with the Department of Science and Technology to formalize how we prioritize the evidence needs for policy. So we also then have worked with this department since 2008 in trying to embed this approach. So what we've done over the last 2 years working with INASP and ODI and other partners in South Africa was when we introduced the evidence approach, we had not done a structured analysis of where we are in terms of what worked. So within the Vakaiko project, we then had a framework that is also similar to the politics and ideas framework, but this framework influences in terms of leadership, management strategies, the structures within the department, which is some of voted for in terms of roles and responsibilities, the culture that's embedded in the department on evidence use, the incentives and capabilities. We also looked at, linked to today's discussion, the internal influences that includes how we are planning in our annual strategic evidence use or sourcing and use. So we use this framework in order to locate what we've been trying to do. But we also, as the environment sector, the other dimension we looked at is the external influence. Because it's a cross-cutting function, the environmental management, we also had to try to look at how the use of evidence is playing in terms of external influences. If you look, for example, climate change issue, the debates around the use of evidence in climate change, those were some of the processes we tried to trace and look into. So what we then also try to do instances of so when we have policy issues, we are trying to ask ourselves, how can we jointly, in terms of promoting evidence use, how can we work between policymakers and researchers to jointly scope our evidence sessions that to that? And also what we get guided by in terms of the framework is that when it comes to assembling evidence that is existing, when it's shorter time frame, that is where it's applicable. But we also then found that if it's long term, including your foundational evidence needs, then we most of the time have to procure that evidence. It's not readily available. And so we're trying to how can that is generated between makers and researchers, hoping that ultimately the policy options can be then the one that is jointly scoped and interpreted and working in a participatory context. This is a framework that we also then we learned about it from our counterpart in the UN, the DEFRA, but we found it very useful. So then the other thing that we tried was that we then are saying as a department, we need to explicitly recognize different types of evidence. We then, through this process, begin to re-emphasize that there's more of other types of research of evidence, and this includes the evidence from the evaluations. Leandro spoke a bit earlier about the national evaluation plans that is facilitated by our Department of Planning and Evaluation. So we do look at those evaluation outputs, but there's also evidence that we get from our stakeholders, and we also do get evidence for legislative actions such as license authorizations that gets to be done. But also what I can mention in terms of formal processes in our legislation, environmental legislation, we explicitly are required to use everything that the available knowledge is used for policy and decision making. So at this point, I will perhaps give to Louise for her to share some of the perspective on management and processes.
Thanks very much, Mapula. So Mapula's given a really nice introduction to the way that we were thinking about all of this. And what we did was we conducted a series of 5 studies within the department that helped us really get to the bottom of what actually was going on. Where was the department working well, and where were there areas where the work could be strengthened? So these are some of the conclusions that we came to, and they're written up in 3 papers that are referenced in the final slide. So the first is that we found that there was a lot of good practice around using evidence within the department, particularly when the department was trying to sort of set the agenda for the environment sector. So there were instances around the development of climate change policy, for example, where there had been very, very good use of evidence, not just of scientific evidence, but also evidence from citizens and stakeholders, evidence from evaluations, and evidence from ongoing monitoring. So I think that's quite an important thing to realize, is that in any department you will find pockets of good practice that can be celebrated and where lessons can be shared. We also found that there was a culture of planning and financing evidence. People were thinking about how to do this systematically, but what we found was that it could be made even more detailed and even more systematic, just to make sure that the profile of expenditure within the department on evidence is well related to the different strategic priorities that the department has. So that's the first set of issues. The next set of issues relate to how people work together. And again, what we found was that there was a core group of people who were very interested in evidence. And this was partly, I think, because Mapula had built this group of people around herself over the years. But there were other people who were interested in evidence and realized the value that evidence could bring. But as with any organization, you can put more effort into building the capacity of other people. One of the things that was also important was the level of devolution of responsibility to policy themes, because this allows people to innovate, this allows people to develop good ideas that are relevant to the problems that they're working on and the issues that concern them, and they can then develop these innovative approaches that can be shared elsewhere. And they can do this. Every different issue will have different groups of stakeholders, different relationships, and so it is actually important that the human relationships, which is the communication, I think, that Leandro mentioned earlier that nobody voted for. But I think that communication runs through all of these different issues. And I think what we picked up was that good communication amongst stakeholders is very important indeed. And good relationships can be built on. But of course, different stakeholders have different motivations and different interests. And what this means is that there's good communication, but when you're trying to turn that into participation around the evidence base, that's a different issue. And I think for many countries, and South Africa with its very divided history, with its history of apartheid, means that participation is important. But what we found was that because the sectors are so complex, you need to allow different approaches to participation to emerge, and this will give you the depth and the breadth of evidence that you need. As if you remember that there was a pie chart that was divided into 4 with the different types of evidence. We found that citizen and stakeholder evidence is an important part of the evidence base, but it's often overlooked, and people aren't putting enough resource into effective participation and effectively gathering evidence from citizens and stakeholders, particularly when people are more marginalised. It's also important in South Africa to recognise the different levels of government and the different processes that are used to involve people in the different levels of government. And one of the things that I think we were very conscious was that although the Vaki-Eco project was helping the national department take a more evidence-informed approach to policy making, it was very important that this was inclusive of other departments who've got an interest in the environment sector, but also the different levels of government. And one of the other things that we thought was quite important was there wasn't really any oversight of evidence processes. There wasn't really any body that was looking closely at whether the processes for sourcing and assembling and interpreting evidence were as robust as they could be. And we made some suggestions for how that could, perhaps some bodies, some organisations that could take that sort of role and responsibility. Now, clearly anything like that is going to be very, very specific to the country context and the organisational context within which you're working. It's not something that you can say, here is an evidence-based approach and here is the sort of body that needs to have oversight of it. It's all very, very contextual. So I think one of the main observations that we found was that quite often people talk about whether or not there is a culture of evidence within a department. And we found, I think, quite clearly that there are many different cultures of evidence, and it's the way that they work with each other or the way that they work against each other is very important. So South Africa has a very strong culture of reporting, which comes from the presidency downwards, and that has quite a heavy influence. It's one of these formal processes in the politics and ideas framework that has quite a heavy influence on how things are done, on the sorts of evidence that is gathered and the way that it's subsequently used. So that's important. It's not one culture of evidence, it's many cultures of evidence. There wasn't really a clear understanding of what the goals of an evidence-informed approach are within the department. And because we were taking a whole department approach to the project, this was something I think that really that interested us. Now I know that some people may disagree that it's not about developing a single understanding and a single goal of an evidence-informed process, but I think it's potentially important at least to think about that, so that you make sure that people understand what is the direction that they're heading in. And managing that when as I said earlier, when you're encouraging a local approach to innovation and a devolved approach to coming up with new ideas for an evidence-informed approach is quite important, and I think that's a challenge for leadership and management. And what it means is that it really is important to take a phased approach to this. You can't say, here's an evidence-informed approach, let's go and implement it. It's about, the first phase really does have to be about sensitizing across the department, finding instances of good practice and sharing those, and piloting new ideas where people think that they may be able to make a difference. And then you move into embedding those practices and then thinking about scaling up. So here's one example of one of the things that we did. We supported the biodiversity and conservation team to develop an evidence strategy. Because what they wanted a way of making sure that the research that was being done across the sector helped them to meet their goals. And that was the request that they came to us with. They said, we kind of want a rolling research strategy so that we feel more in control of the sorts of evidence that that we are commissioning that is being given to us. We did this, you can find this online. Actually, I don't think we put the link online. Leandro and Vanessa, we'll have to send the link to this afterwards to you, and perhaps you can put it on the slides later on. So what we helped them to do was to work out, well, what actually are the policy questions that you're asking? Specify those and differentiate between the short term, the medium term, and the long term questions, and then to work with stakeholders across the sector, which include research institutes and universities and other government departments and non-government organisations and civil society organisations, to understand whether those are the questions that they also recognise as being important, and also to understand who already has evidence that could be used and that could be better communicated to policy. So this was one of the concrete things that we did that we think was fairly successful. And as I said, I'll pass the link on to Vanessa and Leandro so that you can have a look at that for yourselves. The final thing is that there were 5 guidelines that emerged from our work. And again, these are written up in one of the papers that are given on the final page. I think from the point of view of this webinar, the ones that are important are making sure that an evidence-informed approach is linked to planning, budgeting and reporting. I mean, it's important, obviously, that the evidence is relevant policy priorities, which is that guideline 2. But it's important that you make sure that budgets for evidence and the way that resources are aligned within the department, that the processes, the formal processes that allocate budgets, that do the reporting process, that do things like that, are well informed by evidence, but also that you plan enough budget to be able to gather the evidence that you need, whether that is your internal budget or whether that's working with other stakeholders. Participatory and inclusive processes I've spoken about before, but it's co-design, this idea of co-design and co-production of evidence and policy, I think is also very important, particularly in, well, it may not be particularly in the environment sector, but you don't really understand what the issues are and what evidence you need unless you take a co-production approach where you jointly conceptualize some projects to make better use of evidence. So I'm going to hand back to Mapula just to do the final summary, and then we'll be very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Louise. So yeah, in terms of the lessons we got from this, I mean, this is a process we started about 2008 already, and we are still learning. But then we've learned that management and processes of embedding an evidence-informed policy approach is a long-term effort, like an event overnight. It takes time. But then also we do recognize that innovation happens at different levels, either at directorate, program level, or policy theme level. So there are different spaces. But then also, as Louise spoke about the guideline number 5 on co-production, partnerships, innovations in terms of partnerships are also very crucial. Through the Vakayiko project, the way in which we were able to assemble researchers and policymakers and other stakeholders in the project, such are very crucial to promoting the use of evidence in the policy. But then, so yeah, generally those guidelines, those 5 guidelines, with but then also as I mentioned, what came out was that we sharing of learnings, and it doesn't happen often, but we think now that it has been revitalized, we will try and share what we are doing, documenting and sharing what we're doing, but through that process so that we can exchange and get to hear what others are doing, and that is why we also working with politics and ideas to also hear what other projects are learning in terms of the use in policy making. So as Louise mentioned, we have got detailed publications that came out from the Vakaiko project. Your presentation will be circulated, and we had a humongous support from the INASP team and the Vakaiko team in terms of us, as Louise often say, taking a mirror and looking at how the department is doing in terms of evidence-informed policy making, what is working so that we can scale that, and what is not working. But we find that there is synergies between the framework that is being used by politics and ideas, specifically for today, the management and processes dimension. I'm happy with how the dimensions are up there. This is what we thought we can share with you briefly in 20 minutes with Louise. I'll hand over to Leandro. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mapula and Louise, for this great presentation. Indeed, you made a big effort in sharing this work that has a lot of years in just 20 minutes, very concrete and to the point. Let me just go back to this slide, which I think it's a very important one within your presentation, because you shared what you call the guidelines for an evidence-informed policymaking approach. So now I would like the colleagues to share their questions, their comments. We are still on time to have some discussion around this experience. So if you want to ask Louise or Mapula anything related to their experience, please go ahead. You can. So Vanessa has the first one. Then I will share another one. So Louise and Mapula, let me read the question, and while you think about your response. So Vanessa asked, did you build on the mentioned pockets of good practices? Did peer learning take place and enable the emergence of new practices among them? What would you, if you can share a response to the questions while we wait for
Shall I start and then you come in?
Okay.
Okay, one of the things I think is important to know is that the time that we took to do this diagnostic study, it took a very long time. It took a lot longer than thought, particularly because we needed to write up the findings in ways that would resonate with within the department. And we were working with researchers who were possibly not quite so used to writing in this way. So writing the reports where we pulled out all of this information take a very long time. And in the meantime, we had to keep moving with things. So it wasn't necessarily a particular focus of the project to find these good practices and then to go around and share the and specifically share the information. We had to move faster. We'd had to sort of run away with ourselves. So from a project management point of view, it wasn't a specific focus. But Mapula, you can add to what's been done since then.
Thanks. So if I can just quickly add, I mean, I think you recall that one of the slides I spoke about the theme, slide 4. So we have already the biodiversity that was approved by the minister. So one of the scaling of good practices is that we are already looking at how we tailor the things for the strategies and plans for other themes, because so as part of that process we are then using the biodiversity as a pilot, because it was a structured process, so that we can enhance our strategies and plans going forward, which is something we did not have earlier on. So that is the kind of building on. Um, and then also, I mean, in terms of good, some of the things we are looking at, for example, is in terms of processes of submissions for policy. We are looking at whether on our submission steps we should not incorporate a question such as, was evidence used, how was it used, those kind of questions where you intentionally ask writer or the processor of that document and trigger specific questions that will how they used evidence in the process. And then the other thing that we also, in terms of new practices, we're looking at is in terms of budget itself, which links to one of the sub-dimensions there. We are then looking into how to now start categorizing themes, so that we can be able to start looking at the trends over time in terms of different themes that the department has, so that over time we can know how we are doing in terms of the funding for the different 4 types of evidence. So actually tomorrow I will be attending another meeting that is set up by the Department of Science and Technology, specifically looking at change funding for research. So already there are linkages, practical linkages in terms of both the planning part as well as the expenditure and the reporting aspect. So
Can I add something
yeah.
to that, which is that a lot of the because of this delay between the papers being published and us having to move along faster, where the peer learning happened was actually within the steering group for the project. So Mapula worked very hard to make the steering group for the project as inclusive as possible. So it drew on several different themes where she knew that people are already interested in work on evidence. Some of the themes with India, there was a very different approach. Some of them it was very difficult for the project to engage with, and some of it was much easier. So it wasn't a question of going around and sharing these good practices with all the themes, or putting up some sort of running a workshop or something. The lessons that came out of the diagnostic phase were actually quite subtle, many of them, and so it meant that where the peer learning took place was actually within the steering group for the project. And I think what that implies for other people who are thinking of taking an evidence-informed approach is not to necessarily think about simply disseminating good practice across the organization and hoping that somebody picks it up, but trying to be as inclusive as possible within your steering group, because the steering group has a role in discussing and ensuring the quality of all the work that comes out.
Thanks, Louise and Mapula. Important points indeed. So let's see if the colleagues have new questions, comments, concerns, any insight that you can bring in from your own experience in the light of the South African scenario, which is of course very unique and particular because of what Mapula was saying, this long-term effort. Okay, I just want to ask a question related to the overall framework that we build. And yeah, if you may focus on management and processes, this was the topic of the webinar. But let me ask you, and let's come back a little bit to our framework. Do you think that so we build this framework, and I'm sure you approach your work in the same way. The systemic. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, sorry. So using this sort of systemic approach, so trying to identify the relationship between different or the linkage between different components. So that's why we came out with 6 subdimensions. So in terms of if you want to have good management and processes to incorporate evidence to policy making, do you think that there is what are the other dimensions that influence more the existence and the well function of this management and process? So it's the management and process dimension. Would you say is more linked to the capacities of organization, to the resources, to the culture, to the relationship that it is able to build with other stakeholders? That was something that you highlighted a lot. I'm sure it's a mix of all of them. But in the case of the EA, would you say that there is one dimension that is more important than the others?
I think if I can start by, I mean, the issue of the existence of formal processes. The reason I did not vote for it and voted for the degree of planning is because with that subdimension, one we heard from this project is that as much as formal processes are important, but the emerging aspects of things and things that come about that you haven't planned for, but become a flexible. You need agile and flexibility in this whole thing. So it's not, in my understanding, being rigid to processes, but it's also allowing things to emerge, and you learn also, you emerge, but also as we spoke about aspect where then by working with other stakeholders with prescribed solutions. So it's how then you learn by doing and collectively. So I think for me the problem I had with the formal process wedding was just mainly to say things emerge by talking to certain stakeholders, either from research or from policy. Processes do happen that are able to enhance the promotion of the use of evidence. I mean, for us, the partnership issue also, that the role is different in very crucial activities that we had never thought of, but the way in which they happened and the way in which we were open to the way that, for example, the DPME came in with their resources and their nets, the way in which the Department of Science and Technology. So all these players, intergovernmental work itself, because as a department, as a line ministry, we're not able to pull in all sources. We need the other ministries. So again, in terms of processes, the way in which interrelations with other government departments, how other government departments are also supporting this cause. I think it's another dimension that is key to promoting the approach. So it goes back. We did not get much time. Also, when you look at guideline number 5, we would have wanted to explore it in detail to say, what does co-design and co-production mean? We only scratched the surface, but we realized in terms of partnerships, in terms of co-creating, there is a lot to be done still, because as Louise mentioned it earlier, when people can jointly work on something, it possibly increases the better chances of the evidence coming out to be useful for policy making. I think that's what I can add from my side.
Yeah, just to go back to the politics and ideas framework, I think all those issues that you identified, Leandro, I think they all work together, and you need to give different weight to different issues at different times, and you're not going to be able to forecast that, because so much of it is about just taking advantage of what is happening in the context, in the wider context at the moment. Whether that's when you're working on a project to enhance the use of evidence, or like a project like the Vakiyiko project, or whether you are working on a specific policy issue, it very much is about responding to what is happening in the immediate environment. The danger is that you then find it difficult to be strategic. You'd find it difficult to keep your eyes on the road, if you like, just because you are spending all of your time trying to manage the day-to-day processes. And I think that's why we hope that our guidelines would help people just reflect, am I still on the right path, or am I moving off the path a bit because I've been distracted by something in the day-to-day management processes. But I think all of those issues, they work together with each other, and it's very important to understand that they do work together and to look into them as much as you can as you go along.
Yes. Yes. Thank you both for your insights. So, okay. Just because we are behind our schedule, I would like to express my gratitude with you, Louise and Mapula. You were very generous in sharing this amazing experience of trying to make a better use of evidence in policy institutions. I hope the colleagues who joined had the chance to learn from this. We will also share the recorded version of the webinar together with both presentations. And of course, if you want to go further in this experience in South Africa, you can read, and I recommend you to read the colleagues' publications. You have the links there. So just to close, let me let you know that we have the 2 webinars will come in the next 2 months, just to complete the series. Yes, Louise, please, you can share the link and I will send it along with the presentations. Just to tell you that we have 2 more webinars. The next one is on the dimension of organizational capacity. It is on February 28th, same time. So please pencil this. Anyway, you will receive the invitation very soon. So that's all from our side. Many thanks for joining. Thanks again, Mapula and Louise, for your experience. And we really encourage you to look at the framework, at Mapula's and Louise' presentation, that use these ideas, concepts, experiences to help you and your institutions promote changes in in the way you generate and use knowledge for decision making. So that's all from our side. Many thanks, and hope to see you in the next webinar. Bye everyone, and have a
Thank you.
nice day. Thanks Mapula, thanks Louise.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Leandro. Bye-bye.